Him in a second.
Out there. Was anyone videotaping this?
No, my backyard is pitch black.
Is everybody good to go? Okay, we're going to get started with the committee of the whole meeting. Ready, Mike?
Ready.
Okay, good evening. It's 7:30 PM on Monday, November 10th, 2025. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Mike, we have a roll call for the committee, please.
Trustee Ketchmark.
Here.
Trustee Whitehead.
Here.
Trustee Hendricks. Trustee Naramatsu.
Here.
Trustee Gilhooly. Here. Trustee Kaluzny. Here. President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have one item for discussion. It's a continuing discussion concerning a potential rental registration ordinance. We've talked about this a couple times. We took some public input and board input, and during the week we have got some email correspondence, and we brought it back for continued discussion. There's no action plan tonight. This is just a committee of the whole session for a chance to get further information, and I'll take the appropriate action scheduling wise based on the conversation tonight. So to get started, my plan is I'm going to turn it over to Libby Popovic, our Community Development Director. She'll make a presentation, and I'll open it up to board questions and public comment after that. So Libby, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Garvey. As we've discussed before, some of the benefits of the rental registration here in Brookfield would be public health and safety, enforcement of certain standards, and accountability and communication, including having a reliable database and having current information on ownership. As I showed last time, and this is just more to show other Cook County properties that have enacted similar types of rental registration ordinances. They are also enacted in Will County and DuPage County. This board did have some questions as we're discussing this and asked for staff to reduce this to 3 different options. And as we talked about last time, this is something, it's not a one-size-fits-all for every municipality. It can be adjusted as needed. So option 1, we have just a rental registration only. It's annual registration, update ownership on contact information as needed, and that would be $50 per property. Option 2 is a rental registration with exterior and common area inspections every 3 years. So that's, they register annually, exterior and common area maintenance inspections once every 3 years. That would be a administrative fee of $100 for properties 1 to 4 dwellings and $150 for properties 5+ dwellings. Single-family units, because they're single-family units, would only include exterior inspections, not interior. And then we have the third recommendation, which was the staff's recommendation in the staff memo that you have, and that was discussed last time, and that is the full rental registration with exterior and common area inspections, plus unit sampling every 3 years. We used the 3 municipalities near to us, Riverside, North Riverside, and Oak Park, as a sampling. This would include annual inspections of exterior and common areas with a sampling of interior units inspected every 3 years. interior units on a schedule of a 3-year rotation to verify ongoing compliance. And those fees would be $125 for properties 1 to 4 dwellings and $225 for properties with 5 or more dwelling units. We did receive some questions as to why can't we get some of this information just by looking on the website and going to the assessor's office. So I did want to address that since this board and also the public had some questions as to why that's not a tenable option. So one thing to discuss is that legal notice requires accuracy. And when we have adjudication hearings, we have to have the proper notice. So it's important to understand where information comes from. The recorder or the clerk has legal title. So that is a deed that is recorded with the recorder of deeds or also the clerk. That information then goes to the treasurer. The treasurer is the recipient of tax information. So when a deed is recorded, there's one section that has the grantor and grantee. There's another section that has where the tax bill is going to be sent. It's not always the same. So the treasurer takes that information and then puts it on the roll for the tax bills. That information then goes to the assessor. So the assessor is the third stop on this. And the assessor relies on tax billing, the tax bill rolls, and it relies on certain information that may or may not be verified chain of title, okay? So that is how recording works. Those are 3 separate websites that you would have to look at to really see who is the legal owner of a property. So that is if we're dealing with individuals. When you add certain entities like an LLC, a limited liability company, a corporation, then we have to go to a separate state Secretary of State website, depending on where that corporation is actually incorporated. And then within each individual website, you would have to look up who the actual registered agent is. And the registered agent has to legally be able to receive notice for that. So I did want to clarify some misconceptions with that in terms of what staff has to do now to get to the actual owner of a property. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for any questions.
And Libby, just on that, because I actually raised that point a little bit, and can you maybe, I think the board's familiar with some of the instances, how it's affected the adjudication process, being able to track down the registered agent in terms of delay in enforcement and proceedings by not knowing. We've had several examples of that, correct?
Oh, certainly. We've had, so when you don't give proper notice, whether it's for adjudication or court hearing proceeding, essentially the case gets dismissed. So it's a lot of time, effort, funding for having a matter that's simply dismissed because it's not the right entity. So when you pull up a tax bill, you can put anyone on a tax bill. Anyone can receive a tax bill. That's not necessarily the legal owner of a property. And one of the challenges that we ran into initially is that some of our cases had been dismissed because that was the way that the training was done to look it up either just on the assessor's website or just look at a tax bill. Neither are sufficient for legal notice for that. So it's important to actually start with the recorder website, and then you're basically cross-referencing. And then, for example, we just had a recent one where the entity is registered in Indiana. So we had to go to the Secretary of State website in Indiana to look up who is the actual entity and then who is the registered agent. The tax bill was being sent to someone totally separate. So it takes a lot of maneuvering to get to the right information, which would all be eradicated with a nice rental registration that's updated seasonally.
And I know this has come up before too. Why can't we just use water billing?
Same reason. Anyone can be on the water bill. It could be the tenant that's on the water bill. It could be a registered agent. It could be, an attorney. Anyone can register for the water bill. That's not a legal document.
To the water billing, couldn't we request additional information on that if you have a tenant who's, every one of these buildings has water. If you have a tenant that's applying for a water billing account, couldn't we ask for additional information on that as to who the owner of record is for that property?
That would assume that the tenant knows the actual owner of record. A lot of times we're dealing with property management companies, which are not the owner of record. In fact, we have several here in Brookfield. So it's a local property manager. The actual owner is an entity that's out of state. The one I just gave you as an example is a good one.
Do you have any information as to how many times this has come up in the last year, couple years, where we've had difficulty getting in touch with that
The
owner of
actual
record?
owners?
Yeah.
Well, in the time that I have been here for the last 18 months, we've had quite a bit of trouble getting it, certainly last summer. We had a number of cases, and I don't have the exact number, but I would say at least more than 50% that were dismissed because the incorrect entity or owner was on the notice. And for due process reasons, too, it should be the right entity or the right person who's actually the owner of record. So to do that, you have to look at the recorder of records or the clerk's records first, and then cross-reference it sometimes with the tax bill, sometimes with the assessor's website. And then if you're dealing with an entity, you absolutely have to look at a Secretary of State. So we're looking at California Secretary of State, Indiana, Florida, wherever the entity might be.
And I know when I started in 2018, we had a backlog of several ongoing, multi-year enforcement efforts against multifamily buildings that were getting tied up in court only to be dismissed because staff was erroneously citing the property management company, not the owner. I don't know why it took so long to get to the point where we realized that was wrong, but we wasted a year or two on some properties on several different occasions. And I remember we talked I brought it to the board on several occasions, and it was really difficult and challenging trying to find out what seemingly is simple information to get. Very difficult.
Other questions from the board? I'm open to the board. If the board wants me to open it up for public comment and then further board discussion, I'm looking for.
Just about the inspections.
So what we're looking for is similar to what we would be doing, and we don't have it because we've started sketching out what the draft would be, but it would be a standardized inspection checklist that would mirror somewhat what you would look for like a business license, looking at public life safety issues. Smoke alarm, carbon monoxide, any broken windows, broken lights, HVAC. So it would be a standardized list. Used uniformly across the board for everyone.
Action like that take.
It depends on the
Half hour
unit,
check?
right? About a half an hour, similar to what it would be now if we're going in for an interior check. About a half hour with the inspector. It's a checklist, so they would know where to look.
That inspection goes to the
Correct.
It's my understanding we currently have a complaint-based system, right, for tenant issues. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's working currently, maybe the number of complaints that we're getting and how we're responding to that? Because I think if regardless of choosing any of these options, we're expecting the complaint-based system would remain in place, right? So I'm just curious how that's working and if you think there are opportunities to improve that system.
Certainly. So it is complaint-based from the perspective of tenants. If they call, the inspector has access into the unit for whatever the issue is that they're looking at. In terms of an exact number, I don't have that. It does increase in the colder months. So in the 2 seasons that I've been here, it dramatically increases with tenants that are calling if a boiler goes out, heating and so forth. Less so in the summer, once in a while with air conditioning that goes out with that. What we do and what the staff is trained to do is to also offer information for landlord-tenant rights. And there's several groups through Cook County Landlord, Cook County Housing Authority that offers different manners that they can address it directly with the landlord. So we'll isolate what the issue is. If it's one that is administrative under the village's purview, we will handle it. If it's not, if it's just a landlord-tenant issue, then we address it by sending them to the right authority.
I had a question about number 2. Is register annually? Is the registering annually also like the $50 from the month of? and then the $100 and $150 is just every 3 years. So the annual registration
No,
cost?
no, that was going to be for the entire thing. So the $50 is just administrative costs for us to actually manage the just registration in the permit platform with staff and maintaining it and updating it and so forth. The fees for option number 2 is for the additional inspection that we would be doing as well as managing it annually.
So the $100 would be annually or every 3
Correct.
years?
Annually for the registration. And that's to the owner.
For the registration, or is the $50 additional?
No, it's, number 1 is only $50 annually. And also, I do want to clarify, because we did receive some other information, it's not per unit, it's per building. It's per building. Some of the municipalities do charge per unit. We're recommending per building. So option 1 is $50 annually for the owner to pay to register. Option 2 is $100.
It's $100 annually, but the inspection is only once every 3 years.
Correct.
Other questions or comments from the board at this point? You want, is it okay if I open it up to public comment? Okay. All right, once again, we're going to have public comment on this matter. I'm going to ask people to come forward one by one. I'll recognize you can come up to the microphone and state your name. Sir, on the end here?
Jason Horn, do you address?
If you'd like, yes.
4513 Elm. So a couple things. I own properties in LaGrange Park as well. And when I purchased those properties, they required the owner to be on file because if the tenant doesn't pay the water bill, I have to pay for it. So therefore, maybe that's something we can make sure that's on file at the time of closing. And I think that would resolve some of those problems. You had touched on the, getting into units, like if there was a complaint from a tenant, there's a lot of times we can't get into those apartments. So let's say there's a dispute between landlord and tenant, and they remove a smoke detector, and you said there's no cost to the tenant, but then there's a cost to the landlord to fix the fine or whatever the issue may be. So there might be more issues going on there than just a tenant's complaint or something of that nature. So I don't know if you guys do any due diligence to look into those matters. I did have one other point. Oh, you said you're going to send out the letters to whomever may own these. If you don't know who owns the property now, how are you going to get these letters to the people that own it to find out who legally owns that? And is that going to be a simple process? Or you're going to have to go through court to figure all that out? Because if it's a management company and you can't get a hold of them now, who's to say you're going to get a hold of them later? Or a corporation or whatever it may be. I don't know. Answer any of that stuff, but that's kind of
If
where
the
I'm
board
at.
would like me to, I will.
Oh, okay.
Libby, if you want to talk about what the process, briefly talk about the process would be, I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into the entire process, but if you explain.
Yeah, right. Just
It's a concern, so go ahead.
And you certainly raised some good issues. It's not an easy process. None
Sure.
of this is. It
Yeah,
is
no,
very
right.
laborious. In terms of finding the actual owner, it's these, we go through this list right here and we cross-reference it. So it's very time-consuming
Sure.
for that. There is no court process involved with that. So it's really just going through the documents that we have. There's other mechanism that we have, doing a title search, doing a skip trace if needed.
sure.
But there's no court involved in it.
So it's still going to be a lengthy process to figure out who owns these properties,
It
even
is.
if this all passes.
Right, to put it into place, as with anything else, like we did with the
So could
vacancy
there-
ordinance, it does take some work.
So could there be an opportunity here maybe to not have so much cost to the village as to put out voluntary? Because typically you saw here 2 weeks ago, you're going to have the good landlords here. You're going to have people that actually care about this village, not corporations, LLCs, and management companies.
Right.
This way, maybe that helps lower and you figure out who owns these properties. And on top of that, one more thing, I just purchased that building in January. There should be some sort of leniency of a couple years before I get hit with a registration fee, because you know my information. That's already on file.
Fair
So-
point?
That's all I got for you. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming out, appreciate it. How about right here in the front, you're wounded?
Before I get into my speech, I also had just a couple of questions, just fresh off of the points that Libby addressed.
And I know you spoke, if you could just state your name for the
Yeah,
record.
Lou
so-
Arzon.
Yes,
I'm
thanks.
a housing provider here in the village. So just before I get into it, just two questions right off the bat. You know, when we talked about like, hey, tenants, not all of them know their rights. In Cook County, there is required disclosure. It's a lease addendum that informs tenants of their rights. So every year when a lease is made between the tenant and the landlord, that is a required disclosure. So they are receiving that information, and it outlines specifically what their rights are. Two, with respect to the notion of an annual registration fee of $50, you know, my challenge to that would be, okay, let's entertain that as a possible outcome of how we move forward. Why must we have subsequent annual renewal fees of $50 if we've already established chain of custody for who the current owner is? And then subsequent to that, if the property sells, we have transfer stamps that are approved by the village, and we understand who the title of who is on record for the title. So, just two questions off the bat. So that just there. I'm not sure if you want to allow her to address. If not, I'm happy to get into it.
Typically, we just do public comment stuff, but I mean, Libby, do you want to address why the need to have it every year if?
Sure, and
Because-
I can address that. So the RLTO is something that should be provided with the lease, with all the disclosures, lead, radon, bed bugs, and so forth. Many landlords don't do that, as you will see in any landlord-tenant court. So we can't rely simply on that the tenants know. But that's really between the landlord and the tenant, not so much the village. Chain of custody is something that doesn't necessarily apply. That's a court proceeding. So in this case, when title transfers over, the village doesn't have access to that. And to your third point, we don't have transfer stamps here in the village. So transfer stamps are not a mechanism
Pardon
for
me.
us to be able to actually know that. When
Sure.
you have your closing, you're going to have your closing
Sure.
documents, but you as a landlord or you as an owner doesn't necessarily have to submit anything to the
Sure.
village. And
Pardon,
that's where
I meant to
title
say
comes in.
resale inspection.
Right. We only have resale inspections for commercial properties, not for single-family units.
Got it. Got it.
So that doesn't really apply here.
Thank you for that.
You don't want us to have transfer stamps, so.
Very well, very well. All right, I'm going to get into it if it's okay.
Sure.
Again, my name is Lou Arzon. Thank you all for hearing us here. I'm a housing provider here in the village of Brookfield. I'm speaking tonight to voice my opposition to the proposed rental registration ordinance in its current form. I've reviewed the updated staff report, which now outlines 3 possible frameworks, ranging from simple registration that we just talked about of $50 per year to full inspections, including entry into private units. Despite offering those options, staff continues to recommend the most burdensome version. First, let's start with the basics. To date, I have not yet seen any data demonstrating a safety crisis in the village of Brookfield that justifies this scale of regulation. Creating a new regulatory system without clear evidence of a public safety need is not responsible governance. And then there is the matter of privacy issues, which remain unresolved. In-unit inspections will require, ultimately, tenant consent and cooperation. Is the village prepared to expend legal resources to obtain warrants for tenants who refuse entry into their private homes? Creating a new regulatory system without a legal strategy is not responsible governance. The administrative burden and lift of this proposal is enormous for the village of this size and a building department of our size. They are already stretched. If you don't believe me, I would encourage you to try to call the building department during business hours. Good luck getting through to someone. It's impossible. The memo describes staff time, re-inspections, data management, software licensing, and potential use of outside consultants. All of that has a substantial cost, and staff has yet to provide an outline of the cost for any of the proposed options. Committing to an increase of taxpayer spend without cost transparency is not responsible governance. Finally, while the memo references neighboring towns like Riverside and Oak Park, the memo does not include measurable, tangible outcomes demonstrating those programs have actually improved safety or housing quality in those villages where those programs were implemented. Copying another town's bureaucracy without evidence of success is not responsible governance. Brookfield already maintains strong property standards through complaint-based inspections, resale inspections, and code enforcement. A well-run complaint system targets problematic properties directly without burdening the responsible majority. I urge this board to reject the staff recommendation until there is clear evidence of a safety crisis, actual data showing improved safety outcomes for towns with said programs, a complete cost analysis of each option, and a legal strategy to contend with uncooperative tenants that refuse entry into their homes. Thanks for hearing me out. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming out again. I appreciate it. Well, sir, I'm going to work my way towards the back. So, if yes,
Bob Lietz, I don't live in the village, but I, like Lou, I am a housing provider. I want to start by making sure that what I'm saying is not personal. This is business, but this is business to all the landlords. This is business because this is what I do for business. I am, and I preface that by saying I don't want to attack personally, but everything that was asked before about data to support that there is a problem here that needs a solution, I am amazed that the answer continues to be that, well, there was a few, or there was a lot, or there was 50%. Of what? I do not understand why this is moving forward as a solution if there is not a problem. If there are issues with certain landlords in the village, I say you go after them with all the power that you have. But like this gentleman said, we're targeting, we don't know how many, and we don't know that there's a problem. And this just continues to steamroll with now there's 3 new versions. I personally don't understand how we get here with no data to support that this is an issue. I'm going to try to make 2 points before I lose them. On the legal notice requiring accuracy, couldn't agree more. Is this your process when you are trying to go after code enforcement and you can't find the right owner? If I understand that that is the process, then that process is the same for a single-family home that's maybe not a rental. So maybe we should go and ask every person on every single property in the village that's used as a residence to join a list and pay a fine or a fee and make sure that we know who the right person is. If the village's current complaint-based system is to go after the registered owner on a single-family home, then why aren't they doing that on rental? And why do we need another set of a database for rental? I think that we're discriminating against those who either cannot or did not want to afford to live in Brookfield by buying, and they're renting. And I see it as an improper use of the village's resources to do that, and I see it as discriminatory. I like to believe that I am one of the good landlords or property managers, and I think if you asked all my tenants, they would agree. And again, we're going ahead with a set of rules that's going to affect our daily lives, and what happens when that one tenant says, you're not allowed in my house, and then we as landlords, managers, whatever you want to call us, face the fines and penalties for that. And yet, we want to get this out in front of everybody and vote on it, and then we'll work out the details later. It just is not good governance. This gentleman said it. We are putting forth the roadmap to something that we don't know what the end is. In my opinion, it just needs to stop. If you want to know who the owner is of these properties, go about that in one way. But this burdensome, let's make this more than it needs to be, it just needs to stop. Thank you.
thank you for coming out again. Who else on this side? Back row, flip a coin. All right, my right, the far right. All right, you're okay. Far left, ignore me. My right, yeah, sorry. His right.
Thank you, guys. Andre Filippelli, property owner here in Brookfield. Was a longtime resident in Brookfield. Something that came to mind between last meeting and this one, talking over with my wife. if I remember, it was made clear that this was basically going to be revenue negative. So it was going to, even though that there was cost involved, that it was going to come as an expense to the village. When I was thinking about that long term, it kind of raised a red flag that if this were to pass, it would act as a foot in the door to then $75 this year, $150 next year, $300 the following year, constant increase in the rates, amendments to the inspection process becoming more strict, or what you are or aren't going to include. And same thing, like everybody else was kind of stating, that there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And I don't have the confidence, based on, how a lot of government programs tend to go, local and federal, that once this foot is in the door, that it won't steamroll into increase, year after year on the registration, increases and amendments to the inspection process and different things, and then hiring on more staff to handle the magnitude of it, which is going to come at a bigger cost. And I don't have the confidence that I could see it being very definitive for very long. And that was something. Everybody has made good points. I don't have anything formal prepared. Everybody behind me is doing a very good job of that. But that's just something my wife and I were discussing, and I kind of just wanted to put in everybody's head that I don't, based on the history, I don't see it stopping at this, I guess. And once it's in, I fear how far it'll go. That's all.
Thank you for your input. Thank you for coming
Thank you,
out tonight. Okay, sir, in the back, my right.
Hi, my name is Lenny. I spoke at the last meeting. I wrote a few things, but before I start, I was just watching the presentation, and I had a few more questions and stuff I wanted to bring up. I know we said that it will require visiting maybe 3 websites to find the real owner of a property, and the village would have to visit those websites either way to send the request to that owner for that owner to give his or her information. And that's the benefit. You're getting the owner information, but you're already sending that request to the owner. I don't understand that. If the village already works to find the owner, then what benefit is that owner's information? It seems like a chicken and an egg situation there. I'm also wondering if those websites, if visiting those websites when issues arise is less work than the administration and the facilitation required to find every owner and get every owner to register. It seems obviously that going on a case-by-case basis is less work and money for the village. It also saves your constituents money. And then, as kind of piggybacking on what was said before, shouldn't every property owner need to register? It seems discriminatory that only rental property owners need to register, if this is the case. And then piggybacking again, last meeting, we all requested data on pretty much 2 things: data on the issue here and data on how the proposal will fix the issue. I still have those same questions, and I don't see that data. But what we do know is that every constituent that spoke last meeting does not support this ordinance. And to be clear, I do not support any of the revised proposals either. Last meeting, I gave 7 reasons on why I don't support them, and today I'll give you 7 more. Number 1, in Brookfield, property taxes are already higher than Chicago and other Cook County villages. On average, among the landlords I've spoken to, if we use 100% of rent to pay for our property taxes, we'll be paying the taxes through May. In Chicago and other Cook County villages, that's only true through March or April. Number 2, mortgage rates are high, meaning new landlords like myself with mortgages lose money every month. Inspections and fees will increase my losses further and discourage other people from buying property in Brookfield. Number 3, property values in Brookfield are already depressed compared to equivalent properties in neighboring villages, which is likely due to the tax burden. Property owners will continue to choose neighboring communities if the percentage of rents going to the village keeps increasing. And it does not in other villages. Last meeting, we saw that in this meeting too, only less than 20% of Cook County villages have adopted similar ordinances and did not have data on how their ordinances are improving their rental properties. Number 4, Chicago Housing Authority vouchers, or CHA vouchers, is a similar program with inspections. Those properties, even the new construction properties that get their certificates of occupancies and have to go through a rigorous inspection process with multiple permits, fail their first inspection 80% of the time or more, even after going through all the pre-inspections. Do they fail because their units are unsafe? Or do they fail because the third-party inspection companies are incentivized to drive fees and more inspections, costing the village money? Number 5, resale inspections and tenant tip lines are already in place. So doesn't that address the safety issues on a case-by-case basis and save the village money and the constituents money, landlords and tenants? And then number 6, and I only had 6, I thought I had 7. This one is a little bit more personal, but I work a 9 to 5 and I only get so many vacation days. So today I was up early to shovel and clean snow for my tenants' cars. Staying around to facilitate inspections is not ideal for me and many of your other landlords. So to sum this up, I guess you mentioned last meeting that your economic board does not recommend this ordinance. Your tenants, like one that spoke last meeting, do not recommend this ordinance. Your landlords, housing providers, I think is the better term, do not recommend this ordinance. The administrative and the financial burden that the village and the building department will take on is less than ideal. It's already very hard, like they said, to get them on the phone. So I guess my question is for the data on the problem and the solution, but also does the board really want to disregard your constituents' opinions? I guess why are we still talking about this? Thank you.
Thank you for coming out again tonight. Anyone else on this side? I'll go back. Anybody on this side? Barb, would you like to come up?
Barbara Dahm, 4513 Park, and I'm a landlord. And I've been a landlord since I moved into Brookfield, which is in about 1977. At that time, at least I know on my block, those buildings were, other than 2 buildings, one of which was mine, all of them were owner occupied. It is now down to 2 buildings now only being owner occupied. Investors, I don't know what they want to call themselves. Many instances, yes, they are taking care of their property, but there are some instances that they are not taking care of their property. And I have reported it. And it took years for anything to be done about the outside maintenance. And then there was no follow-up. So the following year, everything was back to right where it was. And it was only until now that the property was sold that the new management came in and cleared up a lot of the overgrown everything, front and back. As far as registration, I have a tendency to want to say, Trustee Ketchmark, I think you should follow up with the concept of the water bill. Unless things have changed, when you bought property in Brookfield, you registered the water bill in your name with a deposit. Now, I don't see any tenant going and giving a deposit with the village on the water bill. The water bill is with the owner. Now, if anything, if we're talking about a management company, well then do something to get an actual name that would be responsible for that particular property associated and connected with the water bill. Don't rely on the rest of us who are trying to maintain our property. I've had situations, I had a tenant that never said anything was wrong with her apartment. Her marriage broke up. A year later, she moved out. I found out I had a broken window. Found out lights in the closets weren't working. Found out in the refrigerator on the door, you've got the shelving. They weren't just broke, they were gone. They don't tell, a lot of them don't tell you. And we are willing to fix it. We are willing to replace it. But it's a situation where you're going to have a tenant that doesn't want you in their apartment. And what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to go to the next tenant instead and just kind of forget about them? This is, as these other gentlemen had stated, there is no real problem other than possibly absentee landlords not maintaining their property. And if it's not maintained on the outside, then you can pretty much be assured it's not being maintained on the inside. And unfortunately, I have a gentleman 2 doors down from me. And I don't know if anyone in the village offices would be familiar, but reports were made on his building. And in a way, you could say he's the second owner because his mother bought the building in the 70s. And this gentleman is probably pushing 90. He's basically just cheap. And he needed a roof. There was everything crawling inside that roof line. But he wanted somebody to give him a roof for nothing. Well, then finally the village did get involved. But as far as the problems inside, they just he won't let anyone in. Don't make it the problem of the rest of us because now he's the one at fault for not maintaining his property because he's too cheap. He's the son of the original owner. He couldn't have paid more than $70,000 for that building, which is now worth anywhere between $500,000 and $700,000. Long paid off. These are the people, the individual people that need to be looked at and done something to see that they're maintaining the property because it does bring not just the block down, but it brings all of the village down. And the same thing goes true for single-family homes. Yes, unfortunately, maybe there are seniors that can't afford it anymore. Maybe the solution is to have a volunteer organization to go in and help with at least cutting the lawn, that kind of thing. To do at least outside maintenance. I don't know. But to push all of this on the rest of us who are maintaining our property and trying to do the best we can. My husband has always said, you know, no matter how hard you try to make something not breakable, there will be a tenant that is going to find how to break something. And then you're the one that has to figure out how to fix it or replace it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else? Okay. Open it back up to the board. Any questions, comments? I mean, we're not taking a vote tonight. I'll talk about, you know, what steps you want to take next, but any further discussion at this point?
I have a clarification question, Libby. On the slide before this one, I think, or maybe after.
Which one?
The one with the Cook County, yes, that one. Just wanted to clarify, most of these are rental registration only. There's only, I think I saw one that has inspections in it. Riverside, is that accurate?
Oak Park has inspections as well in the 3-year cycle.
Okay, but the rest are just.
No, some of these do have inspections
They
as
do,
well.
but they're just not
I
on
didn't
here.
I didn't do a full list of all of them. You can have registration, you can have annual, some have annual inspections, some have what's called a business license, where the landlord actually gets a license as part of the registration.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to clarify because it didn't see, like when I looked at it, that wasn't clear to me. I'm also, something Ms. Dahm brought up for me is it's interesting that we've been talking about framing it from the perspective of landlords incurring the cost and the burden being on tenants. And I think something she brought up was interesting in that you sometimes don't know what tenants are doing inside their units. And I think that argues for maybe inspections would be helpful to ensure that tenants are keeping things safe for themselves and for other people who might be residing in that building, because you only have control over what's maybe in your unit. Anyway, I was just thinking about that, and I thought it was an interesting point that she brought up that kind of did not align with what I was thinking before. I guess where I stand at this point is I think I'm always kind of for data and having information, and that is where I'm landing right now is option one is making sure the village has the data they need to ensure that they, who they need to find if there are enforcement issues or compliance issues. I don't necessarily agree with the inspections on a regular basis right now. I think some of the commenters have talked about not having the data. I think I would like to see more information on the communities that do have inspection programs, how many, how much those programs result in compliance issues or violations before moving forward with inspections. I also could get be in alignment with having a rental registration program now and revisiting the other inspections at a later date after getting that information.
Any other comments the board would like to make at this point? I mean, again, we're not taking action tonight. Trustee Hendricks could not be here tonight, but she did indicate that she was either watching live or was going to come back and watch the tape of the meeting, which is an available option for her to get input. And then I'd like a chance to have the board members digest this and get input from them in terms of what action next, if there's further information you'd like from staff. And then, it could work for future scheduling. I'd like to set this, for a meeting where all trustees are going to be present. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of input, and I do appreciate everybody coming out. I know you guys got long days, busy days. I appreciate the input, and the board does hear it. We get input from other sources also. So, is the board have any other comments at this point in time?
I am leaning in agreement with Trustee Hiramatsu. The additional data that I'd like to see is related to our own as well as, over the last couple of years, how many times have there been an issue where we haven't been able to get in touch with someone that is an inspection issue, and then we have that problem. So I'd love some more data on the total number of calls we get for inspections from tenants and around that, and then when are the issues where we don't have the right information.
We don't have specific data because when somebody calls, we don't know if it's a tenant or it's an owner. The data is difficult to come across, so we would have to go through and try to vet all of the different files to find out, is this a tenant situation or is it just an owner situation with that? So that's part of why we're here. We don't have the data. It was not kept correctly, and it's difficult to come across. With the rental registration, the burden and the onus is on the owner and not on the village or the staff or public resources to find that information. So that would be difficult to find.
Do we have data, though, on the number of times we've had complaints?
We have a general number that it increases when it's in the winter during the time that I've been here. And then we have general data on how many files have been dismissed when we don't have the right service because we have to track down an owner on that.
I guess I'd just like to see more of that.
I would too. I would love to see a lot more
Because
of that.
cause to the point of like, what is the problem that we're solving?
Right.
It seems still a little bit ambiguous to me, but I do agree with number one of the registration component and finding a way to get that owner information, whether it's different
Right.
aspects, but to be able to start addressing the other two, I just feel like
Right. When we took it to the EDC, we did have Jordan as our inspector come and the village prosecutor, their boots on the ground, so they see these files day in and day out. And this was specifically to Brookfield, not using other municipalities and their information, what was happening here in Brookfield. And to that extent, that's how we compiled some of the data for why this would be needed, because there is over 20% of rentals, and statistically with CMAP and GIS, there is over 20%. Our files don't allow us to keep exact records on every single one, who's renter and who's owner occupied. And there's a very key legal distinction and a policy distinction between rental registration and ownership. And the rental registration isn't just about the ownership, it is about the use as well. So when a property is rented, then it is regulated. It's part of the regulated housing market, and that is where good governance does come in, to the extent that being responsible and addressing it in a timely fashion without giving improper notice when we don't have that data available. So that is part of when an owner is effectively renting a property, they're part of operating a commercial enterprise, even a small one, just renting, 2 units. So you're part of that, and that is what triggers 2 things. One, third-party occupancy, that's the tenant, and then the other is public interest, and that's where this comes into play, because what we were seeing, certainly over the last 18 months, is not being able to address it, and then seeing an increase in the winter months of renters contacting us where there were problems with the properties. There were also problems with delayed maintenance on these properties, and those we catch just from going on the outside. We have those and we see them. The 5 landlords that are here, they're obviously very conscientious 5 landlords, and none of them actually look familiar. I haven't seen them in adjudication. Those are not the ones that have triggered any of this.
I think there's clear public benefit to the village having an understanding of how many properties are available for rent, and being able to track that on an ongoing basis. So I agree with my fellow trustees in looking at option 1, and I think there are administrative costs that come with setting up and managing a system like that. But like others have said, I don't think, based on the information we have, that appropriate right now to look at a inspection requirement. I have questions about the cost that could come with administering a program like that, and what benefits it provides at that cost. I just think we should remember too the EDC recommendation in terms of supporting option 1. No fee is my understanding. The last thing I mentioned, Barb, was that the Economic Development Commission had considered options, and their recommendation to the board was a rental registration requirement with no fee.
Libby, has there been any discussion with BNF as to what their cost would be for this?
For
inspection?
having it, well, we do have those costs. We did look into that because we have the property maintenance part-time inspector right now. And he's working on vacancy registration. He would work on any other type of registration. So they charge by the hour for that. How much time it takes him to actually look up ownership is part of the issue. To find some of it takes a good 35, 45 minutes.
But you mentioned an inspection could take a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to the inspector's time than the time spent there.
Right.
So just trying to get an idea of our cost. We've heard a lot of different things, that this is a revenue generator for the village. And I said it at the last meeting, I think this is a money pit for the village, that we don't make any money. This is going to cost us way more than we would charge for this. I mean, you have the inspector's time, you have the administrative time, you know, in-house.
Operating it.
There's a lot of cost to this. And we
I'm
should,
sorry, everyone, just, I gave everyone a chance to talk. You guys don't realize the acoustics in the room. We can hear everything, so I'll give you another chance to talk if you want, but please just don't whisper, or clap, or say things. I know you didn't mean to do it, but just, it really affects things.
you know, we hear from, you know, the landlords, we've heard from some, you know, some of the tenants, just trying to coordinate inspections. I would think the landlord would want to be there, and obviously the tenant would want to be there. So trying to coordinate that, again, that goes to the time that the inspector would spend on it. I don't know. We don't have enough on that. I just think this ends up being an administrative nightmare for your department. At the EDC, Jordan did talk about, there's some nightmare cases out there, absolutely. And then you know, whether they're in rental properties or single-family homes, you know, I mean, as we drive around town, we know some of the properties that, you know, we've been dealing with for years and years. There are some of those out there, we know that. But across the board, what did we say? We had 1,500 rental units approximately?
That's what we're guesstimating.
So across the board.
Units, not buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, across the board, how many of those are going to be the issue? You know, to have issues, we don't know. But the idea of, you know, letting the village, our inspectors, come into the private residences to inspect private residences for whatever, we're looking for a smoke detector. I have a real problem with that we would let government come into people's residences to inspect their residences.
I was just, and how confident are we that we could capture a life safety issue in that one inspection at that time of year, right? Like I just feel like to be confident the inspection is thorough, like you would need to be in there on a regular basis, which introduces concerns about cost and intrusion in private property. So I'm just not sure what we're accomplishing in that format.
Definitely some good questions that came up tonight, so I appreciate.
Can you hear in the back?
I appreciate the responsible, you know, property owners that are here and to hear your questions tonight. A few of which, you know, we talked about the voluntary registration, right, and how that might work with collecting, so you don't have to do all that. What sounds like quite a bit of legwork, especially for, you know, for all the adjudication. That does sound like it's currently pretty onerous for staff. I maybe disagree with some of the comments that we're in a depressed property or real estate market here in Brookfield. I think all the data I've looked at across multiple sources say otherwise. Costs are up and so forth. So, or not costs, but sales of homes. So, you know, but I hear what you're saying and appreciate that you're all doing what you think is right for your tenants. I think that it's our job here too to listen to the voices that are not in the room here in the boardroom, for people with all the unheard voices who are maybe more intimidated to come to a space like this and speak up, or know that their property owners, their landlords, or that, I forget the term we're using now, are not responsible, and so they don't feel safe coming here to do that. So we really need to take all those things into consideration. In terms of how can we help be more preventative so that there aren't problems, and maybe just knowing, and I'm not saying know which, you know, if any of these I am agreeing with, but that if a property owner knew that this was a requirement, that might already make them go out and be more proactive about taking care of their buildings. And today, as you know, we have several, and you know, Ms. Dahm said, you know, there are places that we see that year after year, you're out constantly chasing them down to clean up, right, the exterior and to take care. Like you said, if it looks like that on the outside, what does it look like on the inside, right? So I think we just need to take our time and look at some more data, making sure we're looking at the full picture, because it's great to hear these voices, but there's others that we also need to consider.
Why don't I'll get input from the board about future scheduling, if there's future specific, more data that Libby could provide. I mean, she's talked about how, complaints go up in the winter months. I mean, if it's just a number, I realize you can't tell us the sources of where they come from, whether it's tenants or other people, but just any empirical data as to how much the complaints are, what they go up. I mean, Trustee Gahuli had a good point. There's the people that have come out tonight, you've taken time to come out here and give an input. We have gotten other input from other sources outside of the meetings, and we have seen in the insides of some properties. We have acquired properties ourselves and bought apartment buildings, the village bought, and we've seen pictures, and we've seen in terms of adjudication and litigation, we've done what some of the units look like. And obviously it's not the people here tonight, but I think all of you would understand if there are properties that are not kept up. We're trying to deal with the problem. I appreciate a lot of you see that, I've heard the term money grab throughout. This is a money grab by the village. None of us is under the idea that we're going to make money on this, but it's one of our job responsibilities to look out for public safety. A lot of things that we do don't make money, or we spend money on things that might not have that type of return, but public safety is a part of it. So I just assure you the board is taking this very seriously. It's taking your input and the other input, and obviously we're taking our time with this. I know Trustee Hendricks, if she's listening tonight, she'll have input, but we'll talk about scheduling, whether to bring it back at the next meeting or first meeting in December. We'll talk about it. Obviously be published. The agendas, I think all of you know how to look at our agendas on the website and see what's up, and we'll go from there. Okay? All right, thanks for the time, everybody. That's the last item we have in our business. I got to open it up for general public comment again, or further public comment one more time. Is there any, before we have an executive session that's going to take a while tonight, but I guess, there any other public comment? Yes, Barb? You get buy two, get one free tonight.
Approximate are you including the single-family homes that are rental units? And would they be part of the free options section? And wouldn't it also be a situation where the actual owner is on that water bill for those homes?
It's not, we've gone through this. It's not always the registered water bill owner. The water bill can be put in anyone's name. It's not have to be the registered owner. We've been.
And my second question would be the apartment buildings over the years, as I said, were owner occupied, and they changed over, and basement apartments appeared. Now, how is the inspection going to address basement apartments? Because the village knows that when those buildings were built, they were 4 units. There was no fifth apartment. Most likely, now my neighbor to the south of me, when it changed hands a couple owners ago, in an inspection, because it was repoed by the bank, everything in the basement was ripped out. And it said on the inspection that there was not to be a rental unit in the basement, and everything got signed off. That Sunday morning, the kitchen got put back in the basement. When I spoke to the board on previous occasions, I says, you've got basement apartments going in, one exit, no egress, and not that you guys were sitting in these seats, but they all looked at me like they don't know what egress means. Now, is this also going to be part of the inspection? And if that ends up becoming part of the inspection, if one of these 3 options does come about, what are you going to do about that kind of thing? You've got an owner that maybe paid $700,000 for a building with 5 incomes, and now you're going to tell them they have to take away one of those incomes? And sometimes all you need to do, because I'll watch apartments for rent in Brookfield or property for sale, or I know a building is for sale. And they'll talk about what the annual income is, and they claim it as a 4-unit. And there's no way that annual income is off of 4 units. There's a 5th apartment, but they don't put it in writing. Is it just going to be swept under the carpet? You know, how are you going to address that? Or, you know? Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. No, we need a motion. We need a motion first. One more, any comment on this side? Any more comment on this side? Yes, sir. One more. Sure.
Jason Horn. It sounds more like that we need a tool to be able to collect the data. And I understand the registration is kind of the tool you're looking for, but is there any way to collect the data of all these complaints? It doesn't sound like there's a way that you guys record all that as those complaints come in to identify the consistent or constant complainers or buildings or properties that are problems. So maybe trying to table this and look at a tool that would better log all these complaints or the properties that we're having problems with in the village may help us with this data that we're all looking for. The other part was, just lost it. It doesn't matter then. So anyways, that was what I was looking for. I knew that was the main one.
You could, if you think of it, our emails, and you could reach out to staff or emails on the webpage if you think of it. So appreciate you. Okay, one more time. Anybody on this side? Yes.
Thank you. Sounds like you guys are listening to us. We feel like we're being heard. I think the common theme is, hey, we need more data. Hear you guys loud and clear with respect to your concerns about privacy. You know, just on the data, right? Again, I would impress on you on 2 things, right? What data exists that there is a safety crisis currently, acutely, in our village today? And 2, if we take a look at these other villages as analogs who have implemented these programs, what demonstrated evidence can they produce that these have produced long-term safety outcomes, improvements in their villages? So again, adopting policy, mimicking it without data, again, not responsible governance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, hearing no further public comment, at 8:35, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific village employee.
Moved.
Motion was made by trustee Kaluzny, second by trustee Gahuli. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark.
Aye.
Trustee Whitehead.
Aye.
Trustee Naramatsu.
Aye.
Trustee Gahuli.
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 8:36. I think we're going to do it in this room, so I ask anyone not participating in executive session to leave. I do not anticipate any action after we come out of executive session. Thank you for coming.